It is the political equivalent of a Julius Caesar moment for this administration, the kind of rupture that doesn't read like politics anymore, but like an empire realizing, too late, that loyalty has an expiration date. For 5 years, J.D. Vance has been the loyal soldier, the disciplined operator, the attack dog with the polished vocabulary, the man willing to go on television and defend the indefensible, smooth over the rough edges of MAGA for donors who needed permission to keep funding it, and stand silently behind the president while chaos spread outward like smoke. He never flinched, never corrected, never publicly signaled doubt. Until this morning, Saturday, January 31st, 2026, when the silence ended and the loyalty died in real time, not through a whisper or a private memo, but through a single forbidden word that does not survive inside Trump's White House: mistake. The catalyst was the catastrophic ICE raid on the Holy Grace Tabernacle in Dallas, where federal agents unleashed tear gas on children in a church basement. An image that doesn't just trigger outrage, it detonates the moral foundation of the coalition that kept this presidency standing. And Vance didn't take the usual route. He didn't call it unfortunate. He didn't hide behind ongoing reviews. He didn't say, "We'll look into it." He called it what it was. He called it an operational failure. He admitted on tape that the administration has lost control of the narrative. Then he crossed the real line, the line that separates a vice president from a successor in waiting. He told a room full of panicked donors that he is personally stepping in to clean up the mess because the current strategy is a suicide pact, and he's not signing it. That isn't a comment. That is a declaration of independence. And that's why this isn't a gaffe and it isn't a slip. A disciplined operator doesn't accidentally say something like that in front of the people who fund the super PACs, the energy tycoons, the crypto billionaires, and the manufacturing giants whose supply chains are bleeding. A disciplined operator says it because he wants it to travel. The tape did travel, leaked to Politico and the New York Times by a donor in the room who claimed the public needed to know. And once it did, it became something bigger than a scandal. It became a signal flare to every institution that matters in Washington: the cabinet, the agencies, the Hill, the markets, and the foreign capitals watching for a crack in the wall. Here's the key segment that changed the geometry of power. A donor asks the question the room is choking on: the boycott is real, the markets are broken, and watching federal agents storm a church in Texas looks like tyranny. So is the president listening to anyone? Vance doesn't dodge. He doesn't pretend everything is under control. He says it plainly. It's not going according to plan. The raid was a mistake. It was an operational failure of the highest order. And you don't use tear gas in a sanctuary. That is not who we are, and it's not what we promised. Then comes the second strike, the one that makes this tape lethal. When asked if the president understands that, Vance pauses, frames Trump as emotionally consumed by the fight, and then claims the space of adult authority by saying that's why he is stepping in. Not "the president asked me," not "we decided," not "the team." He says, "I am stepping in," and he adds that he has spoken to the attorney general, that protocols are being reviewed immediately, that they're going to stop the bleeding because if the current strategy is a suicide pact, he's not signing it. In one paragraph, he hands donors permission to abandon Trump without abandoning the movement. That language matters because it's not just criticism, it's a transfer of command. Trump defended the raid, called the pastor a criminal, framed the optics as strength. Vance just reframed it as incompetence and moral disaster, and then he asserted executive control over the response. "I am stepping in" is the phrase of a de facto CEO talking over the founder. Suicide pact is the phrase of a man telling investors the company is headed for liquidation unless leadership changes. This is how coups sound in modern America. Not tanks, not sirens, but controlled sentences spoken to the people who write the checks. Inside the White House this morning, sources describe the mood as volatile. Trump wakes up to headlines that feel like blasphemy in his universe. Vance breaks ranks, VP calls raid a mistake. And for a man who demands absolute loyalty, this is the ultimate sin. Mike Pence refused to overturn an election, but he never publicly criticized Trump's policy while in office. Vance just did, and he did it in a way that can't be walked back. Trump reportedly tried to summon him to the Oval Office. Vance refused. His staff informed the president that the vice president is continuing his schedule in Ohio to reassure the base. That isn't scheduling. That's dominance. Trump can strip him of staff and freeze him out of meetings, but he cannot remove him. The vice president is an elected constitutional officer. That fact turns Trump's rage into impotence. And impotence is the one thing Trump cannot tolerate. At 8 a.m., Trump lashed out on Truth Social, but the post didn't read like old fire and fury. It read defensive, almost pleading. He accused Vance of taking bad advice from globalist donors, claimed Vance didn't know the details, smeared the pastor, and tried to reassert the hierarchy. I am the president, not the donors. But the damage wasn't the accusation. The damage was the tone. It felt like a man realizing that if he loses Vance, he loses the Senate, he loses the tech money, he loses the future, and Vance knows it. Because the question isn't whether Trump is angry. The question is what Vance just made possible. To understand why Vance turned now, follow the money and the timing. While Washington, D.C. was paralyzed by Make America Go Away protests, J.D. Vance quietly slipped to Ohio under the cover of an official schedule that said family time. The reality was an emergency summit with the party's mega donors at a private estate in New Albany, the kind of gathering that doesn't happen unless the people with the most to lose think they're about to lose everything. Their portfolios were hit by the Japan bond crash. Their supply chains are choking under the Canada blockade. Their workforces are revolting at the image of federal agents storming a church. They demanded answers. And Vance gave them something Trump never gives, a straight assessment, and a plan that begins with distancing the brand from the man. And now we have to say the quiet part out loud. Once a vice president publicly signals he is willing to separate himself from the president's decisions, the 25th Amendment stops being a fantasy and becomes a tool on the table. Section 4 allows the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to declare the president unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. Vance does not have to invoke it today. He just has to make Trump believe he could, and that alone changes everything. It becomes leverage. It becomes a pistol in the pocket. Let me run the government, or I pull the trigger. In that scenario, Vance becomes the acting power. Trump becomes the ceremonial tweeter, and the bureaucracy, always loyal to authority, not personality, starts routing decisions to the vice president's office because the tape told them where the power is moving. The Holy Grace raid is the catalyst because it splits the base in a way numbers can't easily repair. Vance understands the religious right in a way Trump never has. And he knows that tear-gassing children in a church basement isn't a policy disagreement. It's a red line. By calling it a mistake, Vance positions himself with the church against the state. He's telling Christians, I am one of you, while framing Trump as chaos and collateral damage. That's the brilliance of it. He doesn't criticize the tactic with liberal human rights language that would alienate the base. He criticizes it with sacred space language that protects him inside the coalition. He threads a needle Trump keeps snapping, and he does it at the moment donors are looking for an exit ramp. And the world is already reacting like the exit ramp exists. European diplomats are reading the transcript like scripture, not because they suddenly love J.D. Vance, but because they see a door opening where there was only a wall. If Vance is stepping in, maybe the trade wars can de-escalate. Maybe the threats calm down. Maybe the insults stop. We are hearing foreign ministries are already reaching out to Vance's orbit, bypassing traditional channels, because they're betting on where the gravity is shifting. When foreign powers stop speaking to the president and start speaking to the vice president, the power shift is no longer rumor. It's operational reality. This also detonates the future of the ticket. The Trump-Vance partnership can't survive a split screen where Trump calls the raid a triumph and Vance calls it a mistake. You cannot campaign together with two realities. Vance is positioning himself not for 2028, but for the next crisis window in 2026, because he knows what happens when midterms look like a wipeout. The party needs a scapegoat, and Vance is building the narrative that he tried to save them, but Trump wouldn't listen. It's cold, it's calculated, and it's brutally intelligent. The first mate didn't argue with the captain. He just launched the lifeboat and let the captain hear the splash. So watch what happens next, not on cable news, but inside the machinery. DHS, DOJ, Treasury, the career staff who actually execute power. They heard the tape. They know where the wind is blowing. You will start to see delays, reviews. We are studying the order, quiet resistance to Trump's most erratic commands, and faster execution when Vance signals approval. That's how a silent coup moves in America. Not with soldiers, but with paperwork and priority. The leak wasn't an accident. It was a signal. The betrayal is complete. The endgame is now in motion, and the only question left is whether Trump understands that in Washington, the most dangerous moment isn't when your enemies attack you, it's when your allies stop pretending.